Hey, Lisa.
Hi.
Hey, so I've got something kind of hot off the presses that I wanted to chat with you in a totally prepared. We haven't talked about this before kind of way, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Now I'm very curious.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about wiretapping cases and opt-outs and I mean how well businesses are responding to opt-outs and if they have the infrastructure to do it. So we ran a study at Catch, 170 different websites, the top 60 biggest websites in the country, but also just some small mid-sized websites across different industries. And I want to give you some of the headlines and just see what you think. The first headline is the sheer amount of data collection on the web is kind of crazy. Um, like I was surprised by it actually. So when we did a study like this 10 years ago at a different company, and to give you some idea of scale, there were 10 trackers, 10 cookies placed per page, and now it's like 50 or 60.
Right.
Um, there was one website that had 250 tags run. Anybody can do this, right? Like, you can go to Tag Explorer and you can just see the things start to file. So okay, but that's the ecosystem that we're in. So what we did is we jumped on these websites, we clicked around, we left, we did a universal opt-out, GPC, we came back, and then we saw how many of those tags continued to fire. And basically the headline number is that 40% of them, the ones that should have been turned off, kept firing. So half of the trackers that run were advertising related, and of those, half just continued to collect data. And I know there's some nuance there, like you don't have to stop the tags, right? Like if you're controlling it in some other way, but people aren't controlling it in some other way. Like it's if it's collecting data, it's right.
Well, yeah, I mean, I have to say, I'm not super surprised by that statistic just because as a practical matter, I think website hygiene is not something that there's a whole lot of like accountability all in one person or in one team for a lot of companies. There was not a business reason for that. And so you have these legal reasons why somebody might now start to be more intentional on their website, but it's a whack-a-mole because finding who within the business is moving forward with putting tags and different engagements with third parties that can be tricky and complicated. And then there's the challenge of if you are going to use a CMP, a privacy vendor to manage the choice, are you pressure testing whether it's configured and working accurately? And maybe you did, but maybe your website got refreshed and a month later it's not. And so I'm not super surprised. And then you have some companies who have configured it for opt out, but they have not yet configured it for global privacy control. Uh,
Okay.
or they're using a geo fence and they're applying it only in certain states. And so I think you did the testing maybe in California. So if that's the case, well, then I don't have an answer to that. But I think it's tough. I think website hygiene, I think education around just even digital advertising and how it works. So how can you address compliance if you don't really understand how the advertising tags work?
It's I was thinking through a little like why would I thought it was pretty bad. 40% was pretty bad. But funny enough, I tested it with a couple of brands and like, oh, I thought it would be way more than that, which is kind of interesting. Like, okay, so it was a tough problem. And there were some other studies that said it was way worse. So in a small way, it got better. But I was thinking about like why is it so hard? And I think you're 100% right. It's a moving feast. Who's on your site and who else is piggybacking and who they're ushering in. It's like a constant thing. I'm with you that it's like, okay, maybe we configured direct site opt-outs and we didn't do GPC. Okay, I kind of buy that. Oh, I did do a little, unscientific, but just a little comparison to see. And some brands weren't turning off, site-specific opt-outs either. We didn't do that in an automated way. And then yes, it was in California. I think you're right that some folks think that the CMP is covering it for them, their consent manager's covering it for them, and they're not. So Yeah, all these reasons. I think just I landed in a spot where it's just technically hard, I think, for brands.
Yeah, I think that's the driver we can come up with around the edges. Maybe some of those really are service providers, and if somebody opts out, then they limit the kind of processing they're doing to just a service provider activity. It's possible, but when you've got 40 to 60 tags on your site, uh, the likelihood that that's all in that bucket seems maybe low.
Yeah. I wondered about the service provider thing as well. But so remind me on this one, Lisa, it's in the with the purpose of cross-contextual advertising, can you be a service provider? Like, or what's I know it's kind of a tricky ground.
Right. So you cannot enable cross-context behavioral advertising after somebody's opted out. But under the CCPA, certainly the recipient, if you share personal information with a signal that that person has opted out and the recipient company is going to suppress and manage the opt-out, that's okay. You can also, maybe just for California, you're doing something different on the recipient end for the California data. So you might receive it, but maybe there's a null value, or you do something. We've certainly got some options in the marketplace on how some companies, some big platforms are trying to address that.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, yeah, we saw that as well. It's like, hey, we're dealing with it server side, so you're going to see the tags fire, but we're dealing with it later on. But the percentage of folks actually doing that was tiny. It's
Right.
it's an engineering lift. It's easier to turn them off, and that's why we're pretty confident in the finding.
Well, you need market demand to really drive the amount of attention needed. And that demand either comes because there's business reasons or there's legal reasons. And on the legal side, you see like New York put out that guidance that we've talked about before. They're only doing that because they're seeing broad practices in the marketplace that there are issues. And you think about all of the state attorney general enforcement so far, and the top issue really being opt-outs. They are doing that because many companies' practices related to opt-outs, have room to improve.
Gotcha. Yeah. Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you agree, because I'm thinking, did we miss something? But no, when we looked at it every which way. The other one, the final point was we looked at what type of data systems are collecting data, right? Ad networks and exchanges, demand side platforms, and whatnot. Measurement companies. What was interesting about that is we cross-referenced those companies with the data broker register in California. And what we found is, like, with ad networks and exchanges and demand side platforms, a third of those were also data brokers. And it's funny, right? Is that like, okay, everybody knew that, JJ? Like,
Well,
or is that, I was a little alarmed by it.
maybe the simplified version, you're a
Mhm.
data broker if you're selling data around an individual that you don't have a direct relationship with. So you're both collecting it and you are onward selling it, and there's no direct relationship. It's a pretty broad strokes, to fall in the bucket. And then if you're only collecting pseudonymous information, that is, even though the definition is so broad, and maybe you're only collecting the pseudonymous or some narrow scope of data, that still can technically trigger you as a data broker. And there's consequences if you are a data broker legally and you don't register. There's pretty severe consequences. So I think that has pushed a lot of companies, particularly in the ad tech space, to go ahead and register. We can debate whether they trigger it or not, but that seemed to be the smarter move.
Gotcha. So it's not, I mean, I thought about it in the context of like financial markets, and it felt like self-dealing, that you're on either side of this trade. You're facilitating a buy sell, but you're also kind of in the middle of it, selling the data you pick up while you run that trade. And I thought, I wonder if this would be legal if it was a financial system, like if it was a New York Stock Exchange, and do those same rules apply to data, or is it just a very different thing in programmatic advertising? So you're not alarmed, but you're like, yeah, okay, that's how it works. You just sign up for the data broker register because it looks like you might be one.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think anybody is really enthused to be on the data broker list, but at least a lot of the companies that I work with, they do want to comply with these laws, and they are subject to it. They're going to follow through. And we've already seen Texas, for example, do a bit of a sweep and reaching out to companies who are not listed in the ad space and prompting them, you need to go get listed. So I think it is an issue that companies are right to be thoughtful about.
Gotcha. And look, they did do a little better actually at respecting opt-outs. Where the average was, was around 40%, didn't respect the opt-outs. In the data broker community, it was 20%. So it was better, but the reason to worry was that 20% multiplies through the ecosystem if they're unselling data and pushing it around. Yeah.
Right. So there's room for improvement everywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, it's a journey. It's a journey. Good. Well, this is a nice little like here's where we're at. Well, Lisa, thanks for letting me take you through that. I know it's super early findings for us. We're going to wrap up this report and send it out.
Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
I look forward to reading the report.
Should be cool. Thanks, Lisa. Have a good one.